Princess Zarathel stood at the viewing deck of her father's flagship, watching the human delegation's modest vessel approach through the asteroid field. The peace negotiations had taken 3 cycles, and now they culminated in this moment. Her marriage to the human commander would seal the treaty between the Valerian Empire and the Terran Federation. Still time to reconsider, her brother Kale whispered beside her. His 4 arms crossed in the traditional gesture of disapproval, scales shimmering blue-black in the artificial light. Father grows weak in his old age. We should crush these mammals while their fleet is still small. Zarathel's own scales shifted to a calmer green. The humans defeated 3 of our battle groups, Kale, with ships barely larger than our fighters. Perhaps there's wisdom in learning from them instead of dying against them. She had studied the battle reports obsessively. Human tactics made no sense by Valerian standards. They charged directly into superior firepower, accepted casualties that would break any civilized species, and somehow turned losing battles into victories through sheer determination. Their ships were crude, but effective, their technology decades behind Valerian standards, yet they had fought the mighty empire to a standstill. The docking bay filled with the acrid smell of human atmospheric processors. Zarathel had learned to breathe their oxygen-nitrogen mixture, though it burned her respiratory organs slightly. A small price for peace, her father had said. Commander Marcus Chun stepped off the transport with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was smaller than she expected, barely reaching her shoulder, with the typical human characteristic of having only 2 arms and primitive smooth skin instead of protective scales. His dark hair was cropped short in military fashion, and his brown eyes held an intensity that made her scales unconsciously shift to a more defensive pattern. "Your Highness," he said, bowing in what she recognized as the human gesture of respect. His voice carried through the universal translator with surprising gentleness. "I'm honored by your sacrifice for our people's future." Sacrifice. At least he acknowledged what this meant for her. Valerian princesses traditionally married within the noble houses, continuing bloodlines that stretched back millennia. This alliance would make her children the first human Valerian hybrids in history, assuming such a thing was even biologically possible. "Commander Chun," she replied formally, "welcome to the Sovereign's Pride. I trust your journey was comfortable. As comfortable as traveling through a war zone can be." His mouth curved upward in the human expression called a smile. "Though I hear the fighting has stopped since the treaty announcement. Your father's word carries weight." Emperor Valdris approached with his full ceremonial guard, their plasma weapons gleaming. He towered over the human delegation, his ancient scales bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Commander Chun, you stand in the heart of the Empire's power. Few humans have seen the inside of a sovereign-class dreadnought and lived." Marcus met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. "With respect, Your Majesty, few humans have had reason to be here peacefully. We prefer talking to fighting when possible." Kale hissed softly at the implied insult, but their father raised one massive hand for silence. "Indeed, your people's persistence in battle convinced us that peace serves both our interests. The wedding ceremony will take place tomorrow, followed by the formal treaty signing." As the humans were escorted to their quarters, Zarathel found herself studying Marcus more carefully. He moved with a predator's grace despite his small stature, and his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, cataloging exits and potential threats. The other humans in his delegation deferred to him naturally, not out of fear, but from genuine respect. That evening, she accessed the classified military files her position afforded her. The human commander's service record painted a picture of controlled violence that both fascinated and terrified her. He had single-handedly held a space station against Valerian assault troops for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. He had rammed a crippled destroyer into a Valerian battlecruiser, ejecting at the last second, and somehow surviving the explosion. His tactical innovations had cost the Empire 12 ships and thousands of soldiers. Yet now he stood in their most secure vessel, surrounded by enemies, preparing to bind himself to their people through marriage. Either he was supremely confident in the treaty's protection, or he had a plan she couldn't fathom. As she prepared for sleep, Zarathel wondered which possibility frightened her more. Tomorrow, she would bind her life to this strange, violent, impossibly brave creature. The peace of two civilizations rested on their union. But, looking at Marcus Chen's service record, she began to suspect that peace might be a far more dangerous thing than anyone imagined. The wedding ceremony proceeded with all the pomp the Valerian Empire could muster. Ancient rituals were modified to accommodate human physiology, while maintaining the sacred elements that would make the union binding under imperial law. Zarathel wore the traditional crystal crown of her house, its faceted surface refracting the ceremonial flames into rainbow patterns across her emerald scales. Marcus stood beside her in a modified human dress uniform, the only concession to Valerian custom being the ceremonial blade at his hip. When the time came to speak their vows, his words were careful and precise, delivered in perfectly pronounced High Valerian that he had somehow learned in the 3 months since negotiations began. I bind my strength to yours, my future to our people's peace, my blood to the stars that watch over both our worlds, he recited, the ancient words sounding strange in his human accent. When Zarathel replied with the traditional response, she found herself meaning the words more than she had expected. There was something about Marcus's steady presence, his quiet confidence, that made the political marriage feel less like a sacrifice and more like a partnership. The reception that followed was a delicate dance of diplomacy. Valerian nobles sampled human cuisine with barely concealed disgust, while human delegates gamely attempted to digest Valerian protein synthesizers that had been toned down to avoid poisoning their primitive digestive systems. Marcus navigated the social minefield with surprising skill, engaging ancient lords in discussions of military strategy and trade routes. Your husband adapts quickly, observed General Thyrak, the Empire's supreme military commander. His scarred hide bore the marks of campaigns spanning 3 centuries. Most species require generations to understand our customs. Zarathel watched Marcus demonstrate human combat techniques to a group of fascinated young officers, using nothing more than his hands and momentum to illustrate how humans could defeat physically superior opponents. He's had practice adapting to hostile environments, General. 3 weeks after the wedding, the first crisis arose. Pirates from the Raven Nebula had been raiding both human and Valerian shipping, growing bold enough to attack a joint convoy carrying medical supplies to the frontier colonies. The pirates used stealth technology that made them nearly impossible to track, striking fast and disappearing into the nebula's electromagnetic interference. We should send a full battle group, Kale argued during the War Council. Clean sweep of the entire nebula. Kill them all and be done with it. Admiral Vorth nodded agreement. Standard protocol. We've dealt with pirates this way for millennia. Marcus had been quiet throughout the discussion, studying star charts and sensor readings. When he finally spoke, his words carried a weight that made the room fall silent. With respect, your standard protocol won't work here. The nebula spans 40 light years and contains thousands of asteroid clusters. A full fleet would be spotted days before reaching the pirates' base. They'll scatter and reform somewhere else within the month. Then, what do you suggest, human? General Thyrak's tone carried barely concealed condescension. Marcus stood and activated the holographic display, highlighting specific regions within the nebula. We go in small and fast. Single ship, minimal crew, using the nebula's interference to mask our approach. Make them think we're another merchant vessel. The Valerian officers exchanged glances that questioned the human sanity. One ship against an entire pirate fleet, Admiral Vorth's scales flushed orange with disbelief. Even assuming you could reach them undetected, how would you engage a force that could number in the dozens? Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since the wedding, Zarathel saw something predatory in that expression. We don't engage them. We make them engage each other. He outlined a plan that was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Using captured pirate communication codes that human intelligence had been intercepting, they would pose as a rival pirate faction claiming a major score in the nebula's outer rim. The competing pirate clans would race to either steal the prize or eliminate the competition, drawing them out of their protected hideouts and into open space where they could be picked off individually. "It's insane," Kale muttered. "What if they see through the deception?" Marcus met her brother's gaze steadily. "Then we fight our way out. Humans are good at that." Emperor Valdris had remained silent throughout the debate, his ancient eyes studying the human who had married into his family. Finally, he spoke. "Commander Chun will lead this mission, with full Imperial backing. Princess Zarathel will accompany him as military observer and cultural liaison." "Father, absolutely not," Kale protested. "You're sending your daughter into a combat zone with her husband," the Emperor cut him off, "who has proven his effectiveness in impossible situations. The decision is made." That night, as they prepared for departure, Zarathel found Marcus in the ship's armory, personally inspecting every weapon and piece of equipment they would carry. His movements were methodical, professional, but she caught glimpses of something deeper in his concentration. "You're not just planning for success, are you?" she asked. "You're planning for survival when everything goes wrong." Marcus looked up from the plasma rifle he was calibrating. "In my experience, everything always goes wrong. The difference between victory and defeat is how well you've prepared for that moment." He paused, then added more quietly, "I won't let anything happen to you, Zarathel. This marriage might have been political, but that doesn't mean I take my responsibilities lightly." As their modified courier ship slipped into hyperspace toward the Raven Nebula, Zarathel realized that she was about to see her new husband in his natural element. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The Raven Nebula lived up to its ominous name. Stellar gases swirled in dark purple and crimson clouds, shot through with electromagnetic storms that played havoc with their sensors. Their ship, disguised as a modified freighter called the Void Runner, drifted through the outer regions while Marcus coordinated the deception from the cramped command center. "Signal coming through on pirate frequencies," reported Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, the human communications officer. "They're taking the bait." Marcus had spent hours perfecting his impression of Captain Bloodfong Mears, a notorious pirate leader known for his raids on Outer Rim colonies. Through carefully edited recordings and faked sensor data, they had convinced 3 separate pirate clans that Bloodfong had discovered a disabled Valerian treasure ship carrying Imperial crown jewels. "Crimson Hawks are moving to intercept," Zarathel observed from her position at the tactical station. She had adapted quickly to human ship operations, finding their direct approach refreshingly efficient compared to Valerian bureaucracy. "Void Seekers are also changing course. The Red Moon clan is maintaining position, probably waiting to see who wins." Marcus nodded grimly. "That's the smart play. Mears would do the same thing." He opened a communication channel, using the vocal modification software to match Bloodfang's gravelly tones. "This is Bloodfang to all ships. Got a problem here. Imperial naval vessel just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding we surrender the prize." The response was immediate. Captain Skullrender of the Crimson Hawks laughed harshly over the comm. "Since when does Bloodfang run from a single Imperial ship? You're getting soft in your old age." "Since never," Marcus replied, letting genuine anger creep into his voice. "But this isn't some patrol cutter. It's a heavy cruiser with full military escort. I'm good, but I'm not stupid." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Shinwei, Marcus's younger brother and the ship's pilot, was preparing for the most dangerous part of the mission. "Approaching the coordinates now. If this doesn't work, it will work." Marcus cut him off. "Trust the plan." The plan required split-second timing and nerves of steel. As the pirate fleets converged on the supposed treasure ship's location, Marcus transmitted a final message on Bloodfang's frequency. "Imperial reinforcements incoming. Every ship for themselves." What followed was chaos. The three pirate factions, already suspicious of each other, opened fire the moment they detected rivals in their vicinity. The absence of any actual treasure ship only increased their paranoia. Each group assumed the others had already claimed the prize and were trying to escape with it. Phase 1 complete, Zarathel announced, watching the tactical display as pirate ships began destroying each other. Crimson Hawks have lost 2 raiders. Void Seekers are taking heavy damage. But Marcus was already focused on Phase 2. Chin, take us into that asteroid field. We need to look like we're running scared while getting close enough for the real work to begin. As their ship weaved between tumbling rocks the size of small moons, Marcus began targeting individual pirate vessels with surgical precision. A tampered navigation beacon here, a subtle sensor ghost there, each carefully designed to make the pirates even more convinced that enemies were everywhere. Incoming message from Red Moon Actual, Martinez reported. Captain Vex wants to parley. Captain Vex was the most dangerous of the pirate leaders, a former Valerian naval officer who had been stripped of rank for war crimes. His tactical knowledge made him too smart to fall for simple tricks, but Marcus had been counting on that. Blood Fawn here, Marcus responded. Make it quick, Vex. Got Imperials breathing down my neck. Cut the act, human. Vex's synthesized voice carried amusement and menace in equal measure. Voice modification software can't hide the pheromone patterns. I can smell your species' stench through the comm system. Zarathel's scales shifted to alarm colors, but Marcus remained perfectly calm. Don't know what you're talking about, Vex. Maybe you should lay off the battle stims. Interesting gambit, sending a human into our territory with a Valerian princess. Yes, we know who you are, Commander Chin. The question is, what do you hope to accomplish here? The deception was blown, but Marcus had prepared for this contingency too. Accomplishing it right now, actually, that's when the real trap sprang. While the pirates had been focused on the fake treasure hunt and each other, Marcus had been quietly seeding the asteroid field with human military transponders. To anyone scanning the area, it now appeared that a full human battle fleet was emerging from hyperspace directly into the pirates' midst. The psychological effect was immediate and devastating. Pirates who had fought each other moments before now fled in panic, convinced they were facing the legendary human ghost fleet that had terrorized criminal organizations across 3 sectors. Ships collided in their haste to escape, while others simply abandoned their vessels and activated emergency beacons. Target the command ships, Marcus ordered, his voice taking on the cold precision of a seasoned predator. Disable, don't destroy. We need survivors to spread the word. What followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Marcus used the pirates' own fears against them, creating the illusion of overwhelming force while actually employing just one small ship and a handful of crew. Each precisely targeted shot reinforced the impression that they were facing impossible odds. Captain Vex, however, was not so easily fooled. His ship, the Red Moon, turned to engage them directly, its heavy weapons charging for a killing blow. He's smart enough to scan for actual ship signatures, Zarathel warned. When he realizes it's just us, then we stop being subtle, Marcus replied, and for the first time since entering the nebula, his expression showed the predatory intensity she had glimpsed in his service records. Chun, evasive pattern 7. Martinez, jam all frequencies. Princess, I hope you're ready to see why humans have a reputation for being crazy. As the Red Moon opened fire with everything it had, Marcus did something that defied all logical military doctrine. He ordered their small ship to charge directly toward the heavily armed pirate vessel, accelerating into the teeth of its weapons fire like a missile seeking its target. The Red Moon's weapons tore through space where their ship had been microseconds before. Chunwei's piloting was nothing short of miraculous, threading their vessel through a storm of plasma and particle beams with maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart. Zarathel felt forces that would have crushed her bones if not for the inertial dampeners, and, even then, her vision grayed at the edges. Distance closing to optimal range, Marcus announced calmly, as if they weren't diving headfirst into certain death. Zarathel, I need you to target their shield generators. Human weapons, Valerian targeting systems. Show me what that combination can do. She had trained on human weapon systems during their journey, fascinated by their crude but devastating effectiveness. Where Valerian weapons were precise and efficient, human armaments seemed designed by people who believed that if something was worth killing, it was worth overkilling. Their ship's modified torpedo tubes carried warheads that could punch through a battle cruiser's armor. Targeting solutions locked, she reported, her scales shifting to the deep blue of focus concentration. But we're too small to penetrate their primary shields. We don't need to. Marcus's hands flew over the tactical controls with inhuman speed. Chun, execute ramming approach pattern Delta. Martinez, on my mark, broadcast surrender signal on all frequencies. Captain Vex's voice came over the comm, thick with anticipation. Clever little humans. But cleverness only goes so far. Prepare to die. Now, Marcus shouted. Everything happened at once. Martinez broadcast their surrender, while Chun threw the ship into a violent spiral that made it appear they had lost control. To any observer, it looked like the small human vessel had finally been hit and was now tumbling helplessly toward the Red Moon's hull. Captain Vex took the bait. Instead of finishing them with long-range weapons, he ordered his crew to prepare boarding parties to capture the valuable prisoners. The Red Moon's shields parted to allow the apparently crippled ship to crash into their docking bay. But the ship wasn't crippled. At the last possible second, Chin pulled out of the dive, skimming along the Red Moon's hull, while Zarathel fired every weapon they had directly into the pirate vessel's unshielded superstructure. The effect was catastrophic. Human torpedoes designed for ship-to-ship combat detonated inside the Red Moon's armor, while Valerian precision targeting ensured that each hit struck a critical system. Engineering sections exploded in sequence. Life support failed across 3 decks, and the ship's main reactor went into emergency shutdown. Impressive! Vex's voice came through the static, now tinged with genuine respect rather than mockery. But you've only delayed the inevitable. My ship still has teeth. He was right. The Red Moon was damaged, but not defeated, and its remaining weapons were more than sufficient to destroy their small vessel. But Marcus wasn't done yet. Chun, bring us around for another pass. Martinez, patch me through to every pirate frequency in the nebula. Marcus, what are you doing? Zarathel asked, watching as more pirate ships began converging on their position. Ending this. He opened the communication channel, and when he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never lost a battle he was determined to win. This is Commander Marcus Chun of the Terran Federation. To all pirate vessels in this sector, you have 30 seconds to surrender or be destroyed. The response was predictable. Laughter, curses, and threats filled the comm channels. These were pirates who had terrorized shipping lanes for decades, faced down Imperial battle groups, and survive in the most lawless region of known space. They weren't intimidated by one small ship and a handful of crew. That's when Marcus revealed his final card. Lieutenant Martinez, activate the beacon. A signal pulse shot out from their ship, seemingly insignificant among all the electromagnetic interference of the nebula. But within minutes, its effect became apparent. Ships began dropping out of hyperspace around the nebula's perimeter. Not the phantom fleet Marcus had used to frighten the pirates earlier, but real vessels with real firepower. Zarathel stared at the tactical display in amazement. How many ships did you call? Every human vessel within 50 light years. Marcus replied matter-of-factly. The beacon was a prearranged signal. If we activated it, it meant we had successfully divided and confused the pirate forces, making them vulnerable to a coordinated assault. The arriving fleet was a mixture of Terran Federation military vessels and armed civilian ships. Freighter captains, independent contractors, even a few reformed pirates who had accepted human amnesty offers. They weren't a formal battle group, but they were united by something more powerful than military discipline. They were humans, and humans protected their own. Captain Vex's voice came through one last time, now stripped of its earlier confidence. Clever, Commander. But this isn't over. You've made enemies today who won't forget. Good, Marcus replied simply. I'm counting on it. The battle that followed was less a fight than a systematic dismantling of the pirate threat. Demoralized and scattered, many of the pirate crews surrendered without firing a shot. Others tried to flee, but found their escape routes blocked by ships that had appeared as if from nowhere. A few fought to the end, choosing death over capture. As the Red Moon's life pods ejected into space, Marcus turned to address his crew. Well done, everyone. But this was just the beginning. Word will spread about what happened here. Every pirate, smuggler, and raider from here to the Galactic Rim will know that attacking human or Valerian shipping means facing both our fleets. Zarathel watched her husband coordinate the cleanup operations with the same calm efficiency he had shown throughout the battle. But now she was beginning to understand what that calm truly represented. It wasn't the absence of emotion, but the presence of something far more dangerous. Absolute certainty in his own capabilities and those of his species. As their ship joined the fleet for the journey home, she realized that she had witnessed something historic. Not just the destruction of a pirate stronghold, but the birth of a new kind of warfare. Marcus hadn't just defeated the enemy. He had turned them against each other, manipulated their fears, and then delivered overwhelming force at the perfect moment. The humans called it psychological warfare, but Zarathel suspected it was something more fundamental than that. It was the way humans approached every challenge. Not just to win, but to win so completely that the enemy never wanted to face them again. The victory in the Raven Nebula sent shockwaves through both the Valerian Empire and the criminal underworld. Within days, pirate activity dropped to its lowest levels in decades as word spread about the human commander who had destroyed an entire fleet with psychological warfare and tactical brilliance. Trade routes that had been considered too dangerous for civilian traffic were suddenly safe again. But the real change came when Emperor Valdris called for an emergency session of the Imperial War Council. Zarathel stood beside Marcus in the Great Hall, watching as her father addressed the assembled military leadership with unprecedented gravity. For too long, we have viewed warfare as a matter of superior technology and overwhelming force, the Emperor declared, his ancient voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. The humans have shown us that victory belongs not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. Commander Chun, step forward. Marcus moved with characteristic confidence, seemingly unbothered by the hundreds of Valerian eyes fixed upon him. When he reached the center of the hall, he waited silently for the Emperor to continue. Your actions in the Raven Nebula have saved countless lives and secured our trade routes for the first time in generations. But more than that, you have demonstrated tactical innovations that could revolutionize how the Empire approaches military operations. I am therefore offering you a position as strategic advisor to the Imperial fleet. The murmur that ran through the assembled officers was a mixture of shock and outrage. No alien had ever held such a position in the Empire's history. General Thyrax, scales flushed deep orange with barely contained fury, while Admiral Vorth looked as if he had swallowed something poisonous. Marcus considered the offer for a long moment before responding. With respect, Your Majesty, I must decline. My loyalty remains with the Terran Federation. However, I would be willing to serve as a liaison officer, facilitating joint operations and tactical exchanges between our forces. It was a diplomatic masterstroke. By refusing the formal position, Marcus avoided the appearance of betraying his own people while still offering the Empire access to human military innovations. Emperor Valdris smiled, recognizing the political wisdom in the response. Acceptable. Princess Zarathel will serve as your counterpart, ensuring Valerian interests are represented in this new partnership. Over the following months, Zarathel watched her husband transform the Empire's military doctrine from within. He introduced concepts that seemed obvious once explained but had never occurred to Valerian strategists. Psychological operations, asymmetric warfare, the use of misinformation as a weapon more devastating than plasma cannons. But it was during the Kethval uprising that she truly understood the full scope of what she had married. The Kethval were a warrior species from the galactic south, genetically enhanced for combat and bred for aggression. They had declared war on both the Empire and the Federation simultaneously, confident that their superior physical capabilities would overwhelm their enemies. Their initial attacks have been devastatingly successful, with entire star systems falling in weeks. The traditional Valerian response would have been to marshal the full might of the Imperial fleet and meet the enemy in direct battle. Hundreds of thousands would die, but eventually superior numbers and technology would prevail. Marcus proposed a different approach. "We don't fight their strength," he explained to the Joint Command Staff. "We make their strength irrelevant." Instead of engaging the Kethval fleets in space, human, and Valerian forces began targeting their supply lines, communication networks, and industrial infrastructure. When the enemy sent their warriors to attack defended positions, they found empty bases and automated defense systems. When they tried to regroup, their orders were intercepted and their movements predicted. Marcus didn't just wage war against the Kethval military. He waged war against their entire civilization's ability to sustain conflict. Food shipments disappeared, ammunition factories suffered mysterious explosions, and their warrior caste found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to stand still long enough to be killed. The psychological effect on a species bred for direct confrontation was devastating. Kethval commanders began making increasingly desperate decisions, falling into traps that Marcus had prepared months in advance. Their warrior culture, so effective against conventional enemies, became a liability when facing an opponent who understood that the strongest fighter could still starve to death. The end came not with a great battle, but with a simple communication from the Kethval High Command, a request for peace negotiations. "How?" General Thyrak asked in bewilderment as they reviewed the final casualty reports. "We lost fewer ships than in a standard training exercise. Their forces are still largely intact. Why are they surrendering?" Marcus gestured to the strategic display showing Kethval territory. "Because they finally understand what they're really fighting. Not our ships or our soldiers, but our ideas. And ideas are harder to kill than warriors." Zarathel studied the tactical analysis with growing comprehension. The Kethval had begun this war with overwhelming military superiority, but Marcus had turned their own nature against them. Their aggression became predictable, their honor code became a vulnerability, and their strength became meaningless when there was nothing to fight. "You didn't defeat them," she realized. "You taught them that they could never win." "Exactly." Marcus turned to address the assembled officers. "The Kethval will never threaten galactic peace again, not because we destroyed their military, but because we destroyed their confidence in warfare as a solution to their problems. They'll spend the next generation rebuilding their society around different principles." That night, as they stood together on the observation deck of their flagship, Zarathel reflected on how much her life had changed since their wedding. What had begun as a political marriage had become something far more profound. She had not just married a human. She had married a force of nature that reshaped everything it touched. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Binding yourself to our people through marriage." Marcus was silent for a long moment, watching the stars will slowly pass the viewport. "I regret the necessity of it," he finally replied. "I regret that our species needed a war to learn to trust each other. But I don't regret the marriage itself. You've taught me as much as I've taught your military. Maybe more. What have I taught you? That peace isn't just the absence of war. It's something you have to build, maintain, and protect just as fiercely as you would fight any enemy. And that some things are worth more than victory." As their ship carried them home to Valerian space, Zarathel realized that Marcus had done something no conqueror in history had achieved. He hadn't just defeated his enemies. He had transformed them into allies. The HFY would join the growing coalition of species that had learned to solve their problems through cooperation rather than conflict. The human who had married her for peace had indeed burned through armies like fire. But, unlike destructive fire, his flame had cleared the ground for something new to grow. A galaxy where different species could work together, combining their strengths and learning from each other. And at the center of it all was their marriage, proof that the greatest victories were won not through conquest, but through understanding. Princess Zarathel stood at the viewing deck of her father's flagship, watching the human delegation's modest vessel approach through the asteroid field. The peace negotiations had taken 3 cycles, and now they culminated in this moment. Her marriage to the human commander would seal the treaty between the Valerian Empire and the Terran Federation. Still time to reconsider, her brother Kale whispered beside her. His 4 arms crossed in the traditional gesture of disapproval, scales shimmering blue-black in the artificial light. Father grows weak in his old age. We should crush these mammals while their fleet is still small. Zarathel's own scales shifted to a calmer green. The humans defeated 3 of our battle groups, Kale, with ships barely larger than our fighters. Perhaps there's wisdom in learning from them instead of dying against them. She had studied the battle reports obsessively. Human tactics made no sense by Valerian standards. They charged directly into superior firepower, accepted casualties that would break any civilized species, and somehow turned losing battles into victories through sheer determination. Their ships were crude, but effective, their technology decades behind Valerian standards, yet they had fought the mighty empire to a standstill. The docking bay filled with the acrid smell of human atmospheric processors. Zarathel had learned to breathe their oxygen-nitrogen mixture, though it burned her respiratory organs slightly. A small price for peace, her father had said. Commander Marcus Chun stepped off the transport with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was smaller than she expected, barely reaching her shoulder, with the typical human characteristic of having only 2 arms and primitive smooth skin instead of protective scales. His dark hair was cropped short in military fashion, and his brown eyes held an intensity that made her scales unconsciously shift to a more defensive pattern. "Your Highness," he said, bowing in what she recognized as the human gesture of respect. His voice carried through the universal translator with surprising gentleness. "I'm honored by your sacrifice for our people's future." Sacrifice. At least he acknowledged what this meant for her. Valerian princesses traditionally married within the noble houses, continuing bloodlines that stretched back millennia. This alliance would make her children the first human Valerian hybrids in history, assuming such a thing was even biologically possible. "Commander Chun," she replied formally, "welcome to the Sovereign's Pride. I trust your journey was comfortable as traveling through a war zone can be." His mouth curved upward in the human expression called a smile. "Though I hear the fighting has stopped since the treaty announcement. Your father's word carries weight." Emperor Valdris approached with his full ceremonial guard, their plasma weapons gleaming. He towered over the human delegation, his ancient scales bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Commander Chun, you stand in the heart of the Empire's power. Few humans have seen the inside of a sovereign-class dreadnought and lived." Marcus met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. "With respect, Your Majesty, few humans have had reason to be here peacefully. We prefer talking to fighting when possible." Kale hissed softly at the implied insult, but their father raised one massive hand for silence. "Indeed, your people's persistence in battle convinced us that peace serves both our interests. The wedding ceremony will take place tomorrow, followed by the formal treaty signing." As the humans were escorted to their quarters, Zarathel found herself studying Marcus more carefully. He moved with a predator's grace despite his small stature, and his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, cataloging exits and potential threats. The other humans in his delegation deferred to him naturally, not out of fear but from genuine respect. That evening, she accessed the classified military files her position afforded her. The human commander's service record painted a picture of control violence that both fascinated and terrified her. He had single-handedly held a space station against Valerian assault troops for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. He had rammed a crippled destroyer into a Valerian battlecruiser, ejecting at the last second and, somehow, surviving the explosion. His tactical innovations had cost the Empire 12 ships and thousands of soldiers. Yet now he stood in their most secure vessel, surrounded by enemies, preparing to bind himself to their people through marriage. Either he was supremely confident in the treaty's protection, or he had a plan she couldn't fathom. As she prepared for sleep, Zarathel wondered which possibility frightened her more. Tomorrow, she would bind her life to this strange, violent, impossibly brave creature. The peace of two civilizations rested on their union. But, looking at Marcus Chen's service record, she began to suspect that peace might be a far more dangerous thing than anyone imagined.